Hello. Thanks for coming to another Origins Great Debate. This time the Origins of Deception. It's going to be an interesting evening, I promise you. And deception is an amazing thing in a way because as a scientist, I'm particularly interested in deception because one of my heroes, Richard Feynman, the physicist, used to say the easiest person to deceive is yourself. As a scientist, you constantly have to keep asking yourself if your results are significant. And he used to go up to people all the time and he'd say to them, you won't believe what happened to me today. You just won't believe what happened to me. And they'd say, what? He'd say, absolutely nothing. Okay? Because every time something happens to you, you think it's significant, whether it is or not. And that notion that we can so easily deceive ourselves, even if we're scientists, is the origin of the paradox that we're going to try and discuss tonight in different ways. And in fact, the paradox is described very well by one of our panelists, Robert Trivers, who's written a book about deception. And I want to read it to you because I think not the whole book, but this quote: "At the heart of our mental lives, there seemed to be a striking contradiction. We seek out information and then act to destroy it. On the one hand, our sense organs have evolved to give us a marvelously detailed and accurate view of the outside world. Together, our sensory systems are organized to give us a detailed and accurate view of reality, exactly as we would expect if truth from the outside world helps us to navigate it more effectively. But once this information arrives in our brains, it is often distorted and biased to our conscious minds. We deny the truth to ourselves. We project onto others traits that are in fact true of ourselves and then attack them. We repress painful memories, create completely false ones, rationalize immoral behavior, act repeatedly to boost positive self-opinion, and show a suite of ego defense mechanisms. Why?" And that's one of the first things we're going to discuss tonight. And, oh, by the way, I know that I might as well get this done, just so you can. It says, "Words Down Under." Words Down Under. I got the T-shirt when I was speaking at a literary festival in New Zealand, and the interesting thing is, in New Zealand, when you wear this, it's actually right side up. And now I actually say this because to some people I've told it and they believe me. And that's the first reason I think we deceive others, because it's so much fun. And so we are tonight going to talk about first first how we deceive, and then why we deceive, and then what the consequences of deception are. And we're going to begin with the best deceivers in the world, magicians. Their whole livelihood depends upon deception. Now, there are charlatans like John Edwards or Uri Geller or people like that who pretend they're doing magic. But the best magicians let you know right up front that they're deceiving you, and they still do their magic. And we have two of the best magicians in the world tonight for that. And so we want to begin first with Jamy and Swiss, and then with Joshua J.
Good evening. I have been asked as my deception to show you a card trick. But rather than do that, I want to make it interesting, so I want to show you a card trick in reverse. Thought you guys would be more impressed. Since we're going to go back in time for this, let's isolate my watch. I'll place it first under care of the handkerchief, and then next inside the glass where you can watch it the whole time. Now, every deck of cards you've ever opened comes the same way from the factory. They come like this in what they call new deck order. That's ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on of clubs, ace through king of hearts, ace through king of spades, ace through king of diamonds. That's new deck order. And every card trick you've ever seen starts the same way. The cards are shuffled. That's the first step. The second step, if we've got the second step here enumerated, the second step is you pick a card, and we'll have somebody in the audience pick a card in a moment. The third step is I find the card, and the last step is the crowd goes wild. So if we were to do that in reverse, what would it look like? That's the part where you guys go wild! Yeah. ASU, we gonna get along just fine. Next comes the part, of course, where I find your card, which is, of course, ridiculous since you haven't even picked one yet. I'll place it there. And now I need some help. Second row on the end. What's your name, sir? Give him a round of applause. Welcome up to the stage. As quick as you can. Come up this way. Right there's the stairs. Stairs behind you. Yeah. I didn't get your name. What was your name? Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick. Nice to meet you. You will be the eyes and ears of the audience. As I riffle through the cards like this, you call stop. Can you see a card? And I won't look, but can we show the camera? Well, I guess I will look. That's not fair. Not used to that. You got it? Everybody got it? You got it, Nick? Now's the part where we shuffle, but I'm going to let Nick shuffle the cards. So take the cards and mix them like this in your hands. Yeah, that's good. No, just give him some cuts. That's fine. Excellent. Now, we did the trick backwards to see how it worked. Nick, here's what I'd like you to do. Go through the cards, but over your shoulder so the camera can see them and you can see them as well. Take out the one you picked. You're going to have to look so you can see them as well there. Yeah. No, it's okay. It doesn't matter. I've seen it before, so it's good, yeah. Go through them. Take out, what was your card? Is that right? 3 of clubs? Take it out and show. Uh-oh. No 3 of clubs there. And apparently Nick and I are the only ones impressed by that. You can have a seat. Thank you so much, Nick, for helping. His card isn't gone. His card has gone back in time, ladies and gentlemen. You see, I didn't need to find his card because I already found his card. The 3 of clubs. Very nicely done, Nick. You see, we're starting to move back in time. The reason I know we're moving back in time is because I'm now wearing the watch I took off 3 minutes ago. But to go... Okay. But let's go all the way back in time. You see, Nick shuffled this deck up really well. I don't know if you saw he was shuffling. There's reds, blacks, court cards, spot cards. It's a big mix now. Totally chaos. To go all the way back to the beginning before the trick started would look a little something like this. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the clubs, all the hearts, all the spades, all the diamonds. The trick never happened. Thank you.
Not bad, eh? Okay, good. Well, that's just the beginning. I think I want to call out the whole panel if they can come out, and we'll just welcome them all. So, those of you who've been here before are kind of familiar maybe with the format that we're going to do, but each of our panelists is going to make a little presentation. And then we'll do something interesting to carry you out before intermission. And then after intermission, we're going to have a little discussion on stage, and then we'll open up the floor for the microphones and the discussion until someone asks a stupid question, and then we'll stop, and then we'll thank all of you, and then there also is a book signing at the end. But we actually are going to go right to Joshua. Joshua, as you can tell, is a wonderful young magician. In fact, this year he was named Magician of the Year, and he's performed on Good Morning America and Today's Show. He's been doing magic for 21 years, and he's the age of my daughter, I just discovered, and is still an eligible bachelor. He wanted me to let the women in the audience know. And so, Joshua, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. I wanted to begin by placing my mic. Sorry. I wanted to begin by making a bold statement. Magic and deception are an essential part of our consciousness. But magic is different than other art forms and disciplines. Literature, theater, visual arts are all predicated on the revelation of truth. Magic is different. Magic is predicated on deception. It's a lie, right? And if you ever want to make a magician really upset, tell him you think magic is just for kids. But in the next 5 minutes or so, what I'd like to prove to you is that magic is just for kids, but it's for the kid in each of us. Now, my fellow panelists tonight are going to talk about deception in negative ways, I would assume, and different ways that we deceive ourselves and deceive others. But I'm going to talk about the positive kind of deception, the willing suspension of disbelief. So I'll use deception in a way synonymous with illusion, astonishment, magic. And all deception requires a suspension of disbelief. When you watch a magic show, you know it isn't real. And that's exactly what makes it interesting. You know that from a few moments ago, I can't make a watch actually appear around my wrist or a deck that he shuffled go back in order. But together, we create that illusion, and then there's a deception. If you thought what I was doing was real a few minutes ago, that wouldn't be a magic trick. That would be religion. Teller of Penn and Teller said it very beautifully. He said, magic is the difference between what we see and what we know. And I love that. Magic obviously requires a willing suspension of disbelief, and you do this all the time, most commonly at the movies, right? You know the characters are just actors, the places are just sets, but we willingly suspend our disbelief because we like the way it makes us feel. It transports us into the story. And for me, one of the early examples of this was watching the play Peter Pan. You know, that great scene in Wendy's bedroom when Peter just flies, right? For 100 years, that's been astonishing kids. Yet, we can see the wire, right? I mean, Peter's often played by a grown woman, but we suspend our disbelief because we like the way it makes us feel. It makes us feel like children. Now, E.H. Gombrich, the art critic, called this the beholder's share. He said, an piece of art doesn't exist unless there's somebody there to view it. The same is true of magic. If I were performing in this auditorium by myself, what is that? That's nothing. It's only when you're here to be deceived that together we create that illusion. Plato said, all that deceives may also enchant. And that's true, right? We like the way surprise endings in movies make us feel or magic makes us feel. It's contagious. We want to feel it again and again because it makes us feel like kids. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Every field has theories and theorists, and my world, magic, is no different. And there's one theorist, this guy named Paul Harris, this 1970s hippie-ish type guy. He posed a theory that turned our world on its head and made most magicians rethink their own craft. And I'm really not supposed to share these kinds of things with you, but because it's very on point, I'm going to share it with you now. He called it the theory of astonishment. And it goes like this. Think back to the last time you were totally astonished. Could be a surprise ending to a movie, a magic trick you saw, a beautiful sunset. How did that make you feel? Before your rational mind took over, before you started analyzing what you saw, before words filled your head, how did it feel? It feels childlike, right? It's this weird feeling, that moment. He called this in his theory the virgin gasp. It was never what I thought of when I thought of virgin gasp. But I think you get the idea of what he's talking about. This moment, this astonishment, according to his theory, is our primordial base inborn instinct that we're born with. And only after knowledge and experience are layered on top of it do we distance ourselves from it. It's interesting. The Zen philosophers in Japan call this state of mind mushin. Creative experts call this the zone. This is where all the best ideas come from because it's unbounded. And as a magician, it's my job to try and tap into that moment and suspend it for as long as I can. Now, when people watch magic, it kills me, but they always say the same thing. Oh, that's really neat. I wish my kids could see that. It's as if they're ashamed to be deceived and astonished, and they think magic is just for kids. But as it turns out, this is a very telling admission. Magic is just for kids. And the proof is in the pudding. You know who the hardest group to fool is? Harder than scientists, engineers, other magicians? Kids. Think of it this way. When adults go through life, they file all their experiences in little file folders in their head. And when they see something they don't understand, they want to retrofit it into one of those file folders. When they can't, they're fooled. That's when the illusion occurs. Kids don't have big file folders. So they see, for example, a woman floating in the middle of the stage, and they think, wow, cool, maybe it's, I don't know, a huge magnet that we can't see. And an adult says, oh, that's silly, they don't make magnets that powerful. Oh, don't they? You know? A magician takes a ball and puts it in his hand, and it disappears, and a kid thinks really creatively, oh, maybe it was never there to begin with, it just looked like it was. An adult says, no, if I saw it, it had to be there. Kids are very hard to fool. Now, people ask me, are you ever fooled as a magician? And the truth is, I'm astonished all the time, but not in the ways that you might think. You know what's more amazing to me than any magic trick in the last 4 or 5 years that I've seen? The app Shazam. You know that app? That app is freaking amazing. You hold up your phone to a song playing, and within 3 seconds, it tells you the song, the lyrics, the singer. That's an amazing magic trick if you think about it. And before my rational mind takes over and I start thinking about how that came about, I'm amazed, I'm astonished, I feel like a kid again. Freud talked about this. Freud said, quote, the struggle of maturity is to regain the seriousness of a child at play. And I love that. To me, what Freud is saying that is that as we move through life, we struggle to regain our childhood inclination toward magic or astonishment or deception. Now, before I go, I want to tell you one last thing, and that is this. As we move through life, gaining experience and knowledge every day, let's not forget our childhood sense of self. It's the magician's role to remind us that behind and before our words is a very important state of mind, a primal state of mind, and that's astonishment. It's a place of unbounded creativity and potential. So how do we tap into it? Here's one way. Allow yourself to be astonished every day. Let the little things amaze you. Be curious, of course be curious and ask questions, but let apps like Shazam sweep you off your feet. Ignore the wires on Peter Pan, and as an adult, don't be ashamed to enjoy the magic show. Live in astonishment. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. Now, the next 2 speakers are not only friends of mine, but distinguished neuroscientists. Susana Martinez-Conde and Stephen Macknik both work at our own Barrow Neurological Institute, where they work on visual systems. Susana is the director of the Visual Neuroscience Laboratory, and Stephen is director of the Behavioral Neurophysiology Laboratory. The interesting thing here is we're continuing in the procession of understanding how deception works, and that involves looking at the brain, and they're ideal to talk about that. But the thing that makes it particularly appropriate is that both Susana and Stephen have worked with magicians to try and understand precisely how deception works in that regard, and they've written a wonderful book called Sleight of Mind. And so they're here to talk about the neurophysiology, if you wish, of deception. And Susana will begin.
Thank you. Tonight I would like to tell you about neural deception and what is it that it happens in our brain in terms of the wiring that allows us to see illusion rather than the truth and to deceive ourselves and others. I'd like to start by defining illusion. And I'm going to define it very simply as a subjective perception that doesn't match the real world. And we have illusions in all the senses. We have not only perceptual illusions, but cognitive illusions as well. But if we're talking about a visual illusion, we can see something that is not there, or fail to see something that is there, or more generally, see something different from what is there. Now, what we often understand as illusion is a large discrepancy between reality and perception, but we have small discrepancies or smaller discrepancies all the time. In fact, most of what we perceive is illusory, at least partly. And illusions, as neuroscientists, we're interested in them because they allow us to understand what the brain is doing all the time when we construct our experience of the world. Let me show you an example. You're going to see an illusion. It's actually the first illusion ever documented. Aristotle first described it 2,000 years ago. But the version that you're going to see was developed by a magician. His name was Jerry Andrews, and he called it the trizonal space warp. I'd like you to look at the very center of this pattern, and you need to stare at the center and keep your eyes fixed for about a minute or so, because we need to adapt our motion-sensitive neurons. We have 3 regions of visual space that are rotating in different directions, and the neurons of your visual system are adapting. They're getting tired of these particular directions of motion, which means that the neurons that are sensitive to the opposite directions of motion are getting less tired. They're going to be responding more. Keep looking at the center. Don't look away yet. But when I ask you to look away, what I would like you to do then is look at the face of the person that is sitting next to you, and you should see something interesting. Let's try it out right now. Thank you. We call this a motion after effect, and there's something that I forgot to mention, and it's important. For a third of the people who experience this illusion, it never completely goes away. All right. So we experience illusions, and more generally deception, because our brain is limited. We think of our brain as a very complex machine, and it is a very complex machine, but it is limited. It's limited in size, it's limited in the numbers of neurons, it's limited in the connections that these neurons make with each other. So we have to take shortcuts. We have to fill in blanks. We have to conform and seek structure and order, fit things into molds. And we also improve narratives all the time, to ourselves and to others. And these are just 3 of the mechanisms by which our brain allows us and makes it more likely that we're going to deceive and self-deceive. So let's talk about filling in blanks. We're going to do a little exercise, and we're going to fill in the blind spot of our retina. This is the place where the optic nerve leaves your eye to carry visual information to the brain, and we don't have any photoreceptors, any photo-detecting neurons right there. So there is actually a big hole right almost in the middle of your visual field. So let's find it. I'd like you to extend your arms. It's important that you keep your elbows straight and actually touch your thumbs to each other. Not like in the picture is not exactly correct. It's better if you touch both thumbs, elbows straight, and now you're going to close your right eye and look at your right finger while paying attention to your left fingertip. So right eye close, look at the top of your right finger, pay attention to your left finger, and the left finger, the tip, should disappear. Okay, you can wiggle your left finger around a little bit to find it. That's your blind spot. But keep making your fingertip disappeared, and notice that you can see what's behind the fingertip. Now, how is that possible? Well, let me tell you, this may disappoint you, but you don't have X-ray vision. What's happening is that your brain is taking the information, the colors, the textures, the brightnesses surrounding that hole in your visual field and using them to reconstruct what should be there. Now, the algorithm isn't smart enough to reconstruct your finger, but it does a pretty good job. And we fill in blanks all the time, not only in the visual system, but cognitively and in the other senses as well. I'm going to show you another case in which we fill in blanks. This is an illusion that was developed by Gardini and Gamberini. And we have 3 Pac-Men here. This is a version of the classical Kanitsa triangle, but we don't only see a triangle, but we actually see a pyramid, and it switches between a triangle and a pyramid. But in fact, we only have 3 Pac-Man and 3 patches of gray. And with this very limited information, our brain puts together a percept that is much more complex by filling in these blanks in our perception. What about seeking and conforming to a structure? Our brain constantly tries to make sense of the world, and it seeks to impose order. Such as here, this is reorganized healing grid illusion. What I'd like you to do is stare at the very center. Well, first you can see there's a pattern that looks regular in the middle, but towards the outsides is disorganized, it's random. Let's make it completely organized just by using the capabilities of your visual system. Stare at the very center, choose one intersection, and keep your eyes as still as you can. Try to minimize all of your eye movements, and your visual system is going to take the order from the center and impose this structure in the surrounding areas. The next illusion also shows you how the visual system conforms to structure. This illusion was developed by Rove and Lyer and their colleagues, and it's based on after images. An after image is what you experience when you look, for instance, at a bright light, and then you look at a blank wall and you see a shadow. That's an after image, and this is what you're seeing here. Now here we can see several flashes of geometrical figures. The only real colors are happening when we see the 6-point star. Those are real colors, but the other colors that you see are just made up by your visual system. But now the interesting thing here is that the colors, even though the after image always stays the same, we see different colors, and we see that the colors fit these frames that are actually empty. So your brain is taking this whole color after image information, and it's making it fit inside of these rather artificial frames. I want to talk about that one last mechanism by which our brain is leading us to deception, and in this particular case, not only deception of self, but of others, and through the improvement of narratives. This is a relatively new paradigm in cognitive science. It's called choice blindness. And what it means is that we're basically blind to the results of our own choices. The experimenters that came up with this idea, they had subjects in the laboratory choose between 2 pictures. They asked them which face is the most attractive of the 2. And the subjects would choose one of the faces. But then the experimenters actually did a magic trick, and they switched the 2 faces so that when they asked the subjects to pick up the face or the photograph that they had just chosen, in fact, they got a different one. Now, what happened here, surprisingly, is that in a large percentage of the cases, people didn't realize that they had chosen, that they were given the face that they had not actually chosen. But not only that, and here this is the most interesting part, and the part that has to do the most with deception. After they picked up the wrong card, the experimenters asked, well, tell me, why did you choose that picture in particular and not the other one? And here the subjects confabulated. They started making up all sorts of reasons. You can see a selection here. These are the comments of a few subjects. So you have the 2 faces of the women. Now remember, the face that they're explaining why they chose that face rather than the other one, this is always the wrong choice, is the choice that they hadn't made. She's radiant. I would have approached her at a bar. I like earrings. Notice that the one that they actually chose didn't have earrings. She looks like an aunt of mine, I said, and she seems nicer. Wrong, it's all a lie. It's all a lie. She looks very hot in this picture. Just a nice shape of the face and the chin. I thought she had more personality, blah, 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 all made up. I don't know, well, at least this person is honest. And they can't even regret it. Why did I choose her? She's very masculine, I don't like her. But still, they're coming up with all of these reasons to deceive themselves and others, basically improving a narrative, improving the narrative of their own experience. And what this tells us is that when we analyze our own actions, our own choices, we take a third-person approach. It is really no different when we see somebody do something that we don't really understand. We try to come up with reasons. Well, maybe that person has a bad day, or maybe, who knows, whatever happened. We do the same thing with our own actions, with our own choices. Why did I do this? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because... And that's how we try again to make sense, to organize, to fill in blanks, to improve the narrative of our life. And because of these brain limitations, we end up with a situation of deception and self-deception. Thank you very much.
Stephen?
Thank you. So Susana was telling us about visual illusions. She was telling us about also cognitive illusions in the sense of choice blindness. And what I'm going to talk to you about is specifically about magic. Now, Susana and I, we started studying magicians because we realized that magicians were the world's artists of attention and awareness. They manipulate our attention like a magnet manipulates a compass. And we realized also at the same time that they did this so well. They did it certainly better than scientists. And we needed to learn what they were doing for us to take these techniques back to the laboratory and increase the rate of discovery in cognitive neuroscience. That was the idea. So when we started working with them, such as Jamy and Joshua, we very quickly learned that we were absolutely right. The intuition was correct. And so I want to tell you a little bit about what we've learned from magicians about our brains and about deception. So here is a magician named Apollo Robbins, the gentleman thief, and he's going to do a very standard magic trick. Here, take a look. He's got a coin in his. He's got a coin here in his left hand. So, and here we go. And the look. Okay. So how did that happen? How did that coin disappear? What was happening in your brain when that happened? This is fundamental to how we see, and it's fundamental to how we think. So we decided to take a closer look at that. Let's think about what's actually happening here. We have light coming off of Apollo. It's entering your eye, being focused by the optics of your eye onto the back of your retina. The retina is transducing these signals into electrochemical signals that travel through the visual system to the back of the brain where the primary visual cortex lies. And the signals from the retina are patterned into a map of the visual world. And you can actually see the activity in the map matches that visual world. We call it retinotopic mapping. And in this case, it maps to Apollo Robbins, and specifically to where we were paying attention on Apollo Robbins' body right here at this hand. So this is all a very important clue to what the brain's doing to help you actually experience this trick of the coin disappearing. We'll get to that in a second. So now, the real question is, how can these circuits in the brain, these inanimate neurons that are interconnected into a network that somehow becomes animate, how can this possibly happen? I mean, let's think about who you are, okay? What you are is a bunch of electrochemical signals in the neurons in your brain. These neurons somehow get information from the sensory systems, as we've shown from the eyes, and from the ears, and from the skin, and from all of the sensory systems. It takes that information, and it builds a simulation of the world for you. It mixes it with the cognitive things that you know, your memories, your causal functions in your brain that say which one thing comes before the other. And it puts it all together, and it builds a simulation of the world, which is the only thing that you have ever interacted with in your entire life, right? I'm not saying that the real world isn't out there. It is. But you've never lived there, right? You've never even been there for a visit. You've only ever been in these circuits in your own brain, and that's the only thing you will ever be in the future. So this gives you a hint as to how the magicians can manipulate our minds, because they have very good access to the very sparse information that we have to create this simulation of the world. Okay, so this is going to be a model of how attention specifically works in the magic trick we showed you before. So here we have, I'm showing you 3 neurons here, but in fact these represent hundreds of thousands of neurons. Now in that map I showed you, you can imagine this neuron here being focused on the hand that stole the coin. Okay? Now in the primary visual cortex, one of the things that we've discovered, Susana and I with our colleagues at SUNY and UConn, was that these neurons here are actually motion direction selective in the primary visual cortex, and what happens is these neurons are activated to the sweeping of the hand during the steal of the coin, during motion in the visual system. And what happens when these neurons are activated, since that's the focus of the attention of the observer, these blue neurons are actually activated as well by the cognitive attention system. And that causes inhibition of the surrounding. Okay, let's take a look at what that looks like. So we have here activation of the central neurons due to motion of the hand. Also, simultaneously, we're paying attention to that area, so we suppress everything else, which gives us this spotlight and suppresses everything else. So what's happening is magicians are actually playing a form of mental jiu-jitsu on you, okay? They're getting you to pay attention to a specific point in visual space inside your mind, and your attentional systems then suppress everything else, including where the coin actually is. Okay? So this is exactly one of the mechanisms underlying misdirection in magic. Okay, so we've got the light coming off of Apollo, it's going into the eyes, the retinas transduces into electrochemical signals, it travels through the optic nerves, back through the brain to the primary visual cortex, where it forms an image of Apollo Robbins, and we see that where we're paying attention is this hand, and because we're paying attention to this hand, it suppresses everything else. Okay? So that's the fundamental neural mechanism of this kind of misdirection. So what does this mean for us in our real lives and about deception in the world? Well, let's take the story of these 2 young women. They're ASU students. They're in one of the apartment dorms, and they're sharing a kitchen here. And this young woman in green is talking to her friend, Blue, about her boyfriend problems. Again, for the 7th time this week. Now, what's interesting here is this woman in blue, she's very polite. She's paying attention. She's attentive to the young woman in green. She's looking at her in the face. She's nodding at the appropriate points of time here. But we all know that she's actually paying attention right here. Just like most of you have been doing for the last couple of minutes since I put this slide up. So what's interesting here is that we can do this at all. So let's recap here. So put your thumbs out in front of you about arm's length. It's okay, everybody. You'll look like a nerd, but that's okay. Think of Lawrence's shirt, and it'll be okay. So fixate on your thumbnail, okay? Your thumbnail is about 1 degree of visual angle in your eye. That means if you had 360 thumbs, it would make a circle all the way around your head, okay? Now, while you're looking at that thumbnail, it turns out that in your visual system, the only thing you can actually see is your thumbnail itself. Everything else, you're basically legally blind. Okay? So let me say that again. You can only see 1 square degree of vision in your entire 1,000 square degrees of visual field. You only see the 1 square degree in the very center. Everywhere else, you're legally blind. So what that means is, what she's doing is she's actually looking at her friend here, but she's paying attention to visual garbage. She knows chocolate cake is there. Presumably she saw it there before when she actually looked at it. But she's still paying attention there. So why would we ever want to do that? Humans seem to have developed the ability to dissociate where they pay attention in space from the only place in space they can see. And so this is a form of deception, certainly. It's a form of interpersonal communication where people have evolved the ability to look at one thing, to make people think looking and paying attention to one thing when in fact they're paying attention somewhere else. So we think that this is a very interesting point in terms of how magic works, but also in terms of how our interpersonal deceptions help us in our interpersonal relationships. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move from the sort of how to the why. And the perfect person to introduce that is slowly making his way back up to the stage. We're very excited to have Robert Trivers here. In fact, in some sense, the idea of having an event on deception occurred because we were able to get Robert to come here. He has been essentially a leader, in fact, almost created the modern field of evolutionary psychology. In the 1970s, even as a graduate student at Harvard, began work on what's called reciprocal altruism that changed the field. And I was impressed that actually Steve Pinker, who many of you know has been here a number of times, said of Robert that he's one of history's greatest thinkers in the analysis of behavior and emotion. And more recently, Robert has turned to the idea of self-deception and trying to understand exactly why and what the benefits and pitfalls of that are. And so, Robert, I turn the floor over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So what is self-deception? Self-deception is keeping the truth from your conscious mind. That is counterintuitive. You'd think you would want the truth to be always in your conscious mind to link up with whatever the powers of consciousness are, a problem we still don't terribly well understand. So it's counterintuitive. If I take $10 from you, you lose 10 and I gain 10 if you don't notice it. But what's the benefit of me taking $10 out of this pocket and sticking it in that pocket? This has been a problem in human thought for a long time. For many years I've thought there was a simple solution, that self-deception evolved the better to deceive others. So if I'm lying to you now about something you actually care about, better yet you know me, you're close at hand, you can pay attention to any of the subtle cues of conscious deception, but if I'm unaware I'm lying, then I'll not show those signs and my voice will be surrounded with the sincerity and so on that we associate with honesty. To give you just one cue, one that works fairly well is a tendency when we lie for our voice to rise at least slightly, especially when we come to the key word. And that's because we're a little bit nervous about getting detected, which will reverse the benefit cost situation. And tensing up the diaphragm and along here tends to raise our voice. I'll give you one absurd example in my own life. Several years ago, a woman was denying something I was not accusing her of, namely having a homosexual relationship with another woman. So she says, "You think I'm there with Sherry?" And her voice shot up on the key word because she lost it. And I said to myself, well, I did have a hypothesis, and now I have slightly more evidence. Now, what I want to concentrate today is just a small part of this whole area, and that is what's the relationship between intelligence, somehow defined and measured, and self-deception. All right? This is a very important result, summarized as follows. The smarter your child is, the more they lie. So here's the experiment. The child is sitting in a seat. There's a box behind the child that the child can't see. The experimenter comes in, opens the box, sticks something in it, closes it, and says, "Do not peek. I'm going to leave the room for a couple of minutes. Do not peek." Then they go around, of course, peek in on the child through a one-way mirror. Most children peek. Then they come back and they say, "Did you peek?" Most children lie. But the key is that the brighter they are, these are 4-year-old children that have been given a little cognitive test, and the brighter they are, well, if they're in the top category, why is this going on? Huh? Will you allow me to run this thing, please? 100% of the children lie. If you have a relatively slow child, only 65% of the children lie. All right, the same. Whoops, I should be flashing it here. Well, no, you're leaving out something, brothers. Well, they left out something that should be in there. Namely, the same thing is true of monkeys and apes, adults. That is, if you look at deceptive acts in nature, and they did a vast, careful study of all the field studies and scored what they call tactical deception. That's where you see deception and you see that what its payoff is or intended payoff is. And they found that the larger the neocortex of the animal was, that's this brain, but you could use the entire brain corrected for body size, the more often they lied in nature. So you lie more as a child in humans, you lie more as an adult in humans. Now, we don't know about self-deception. That's much more difficult to measure, but I'll give you one little fact that ought to give you cause. We, in general, have a tendency to put ourselves in the top half of a favorable category. So 80% of high school seniors will say they're in the top half for leadership ability. It's not possible. But you cannot beat academics. 94% of professors in the U.S. regard themselves as being in the top half of the distribution. And I plead guilty, because I can be tied down to a bed in a back ward of Phoenix General Hospital, and I still think I'm doing better than half my colleagues. And that's not just a comment on my colleagues. All right, now here's another interesting experiment that relates to a sense of power and how this affects our intelligence. Okay, there are two ways you can write an E on your forehead. You can write an other-focused E so that you all can see it. It's backwards to me, or as this somewhat, well, okay, thank you. Somewhat more malevolent-looking organism here is writing a self-focused E, so as you look through it, he sees an E, but you don't. Now, in actual fact, most people, all right, that's the monkey slide they got backwards. I don't know how they pulled that trick, but this is ASU. Anything's possible. All right. Now, most people, in fact, write an other-directed E, but it depends on their sense of power. So psychologists have these little tricks that they will apply to you that creates a temporary state in you, and then they measure the effect of the temporary state. So they can make you feel more powerful, or they can make you feel powerless. It's partly getting you right about a situation where you felt powerful, how'd you feel, blah, 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 and then you get to pass out the M&Ms to the group. The powerless describe a situation where they had no power, and all they're allowed to do is write down how many M&Ms they hope to get. Okay. These little primes just act for a short period of time, but long enough to produce an interesting effect. Namely, those with a low power, they only write a self-focused E about 12% of the time. But if they're made to feel powerful, it's 3 times as often. Now, before I go on with the rest of the correlates, you got to love social scientists. Why, in sweet Jesus' name, do they make this graph 3-dimensional? You got to run along here and run down here. You got to run all the way here and then run down here. So I think the general rule must be the less content in the discipline, the more the presentation. But there are other correlates of this power manipulation that are perhaps even more interesting. Those that are made to feel powerful recognize human faces less well. This is where you just flash them 1 second. Anger, sad, etc. Less well than the powerless. They remember faces less well, and they have a harder time taking someone else's viewpoint in a simulated situation. The people that are powerless have got to pay attention to these kind of variables. Now, it's worse if it's a powerful man, because although both sexes tend to be overconfident, it's more a male disease than a female disease. So an overconfident male is both a powerful male is both overconfident and ignorant. That's a bad combination, you know. And and the fact that he was known to be very bright did not guard him from self-deception. It just made the self-deception all the worse. Okay. Now let me show you good. Let me show you the last little relationship here that I think you'll enjoy. And this is work that was done in Georgia on A1 heterosexual men. What's an A1 heterosexual man? He's only had heterosexual experiences. He's never had a homosexual fantasy or even a homosexual thought, or so he says. You then divide them through some little paper pencil test into those that are relatively upset about male homosexuality, these are men, or relatively relaxed, okay? I would be very distressed if my son's high school math teacher were gay, or, if I see two men holding hands, I get outraged. Okay, or you're relaxed. Now comes the fun part. They show them dirty movies, but they take the trouble to attach a plethysmograph to the base of each man's, forgive me, dick, because I don't like the word. It may be a personal problem with me, but the word penis is unattractive. So anyway, so now they've got an objective measure of the man's arousal. All right. So first they show him 6 minutes of a pornographic movie, man and woman making love. The dick grows admirably, continues to. In fact, it looks like there's still a little bit of tumescence left over for the 7th minute. Now, there's no difference between the two categories of men, the homophobic and non-homophobic, so I won't tell you which is which. Now we're going to watch two women making love, and you see there's a nice start off, but for certain reasons we won't go into it, tapers off to this. Again, there's no significant difference. Now, I think you're going to guess what's down here. Here's two men getting it on. Here are the non-homophobic men. They show a slight and, as it turns out, statistically insignificant increase in tumescence. Here are the homophobic men. Starting to rise, taking off here, continuing to rise. Hell, they get halfway, they get 2/3 of the way up to seeing two women together. Now, when you ask each of these men in each of these conditions, in 5 out of 6 conditions, the men correctly state their tumescence and their level of arousal is highly correlated with them. The only one that doesn't is this character down here. So there's seems to be a kind of a denial of what's in you, a projection onto others, and then an attack on it. Freud had a particular term for this kind of thing, reaction formation, where you deny something you find unappealing in yourself and then attack it in others. Now, in this country, this is a monthly occurrence. A preacher or a politician who's taken a strong stand against homosexuality gets outed, whether it's in a men's room in the Minneapolis airport or whether it's in a mega church in Georgia. All right? So, in short, you can't summarize a little short thing like this, but I'll just summarize it by saying that self-deception is a general feature of our life, from our most intimate relations to our international relations. It's something that we can all be involved in studying all different fields, arts, biography, so forth. It doesn't have to be evolutionary biology. And we can also do it just personally in our own lives, right? So it's something we can all partake on. The logic is simple, and the results apply generally. And I think I'll just end with Groucho Marx, who had a beautiful quote that encapsulate some of the contradiction of this. And here's what Groucho said. The key to life is honesty and fair play. If you can fake those, you've got it made.
Well, we'll segue to as we move towards. I've got the clicker. Yeah, don't worry, I got it.
You think I'm going to follow that?
Yeah, well, you've got to follow that, Carol. We'll move next to Carol Tavris, and we're going to move more from. We've been moving from the brain to the self to society. And the interesting thing about Carol, who's a social psychologist, is she's emphasized the fact that the brain, it's not just the brain. All you ever hear about is the brain, as she said. But in fact, it's society as well. And society and culture affect the brain in some sense as much as the brain affects society and culture. And so we want to move towards that. And Carol has written on in particular, the idea of dissonance, cognitive dissonance. And has pointed out that when dissonance is when you deceive yourself in a sense, that when something deeply affects your concept of yourself and it disagrees with what happens. Say, for example, you came here and you gave the technician slides in the wrong order. And I think you get the point. Carol?
Mistakes were made, but not by me, is what this theme is. Lawrence, thank you. And actually, I'm quite honored to be included in this group as a social psychologist, because many people think that, if you claim you're doing psychological science, that's an oxymoron anyway. And my job as a social psychologist is to explain that actually, yes, social psychologists do research, and we are scientists in our own way. In Los Angeles, where I live, people think a social psychologist is a therapist who hangs out in a lot of bars. And so I'm always trying to explain what exactly it is that we do. And of course, I do share the admiration in our society for the research from neuroscience. Look what we've learned tonight on this panel, and the findings from evolutionary psychology. But as Lawrence said, with a kind of caution, because I'm worried that biological reductionism has become so extreme that nowadays people think, really to show you're doing science, you've got to be studying the brain. There were two researchers actually did a cute study of this. They gave the same lecture to two different audiences. But one audience heard the lecture with a brain, scans, fMRIs and so forth, and the other did not. And everybody thought that the lecture with the brain was more scientific. So now, I don't go anywhere without my brain. I just want to reassure you that you will be hearing about some science this evening. Okay, no brain. Now, I also want to say that I'm really impressed by the research we've had from evolutionary psychology. I think it's tremendously important, and an important humility correction for us all. The fact that basic personality traits like extroversion can be found in the octopus certainly should give us pause as a species. But also, as a social psychologist, I've been interested in how our theories of evolution have changed, evolved, dare I say, over the decades. When I was in graduate school, in the days before there were any women's bathrooms on the floor of the US Senate, it was so long ago that PMS had not been invented. Theories of evolution were primarily designed to explain to us why men had the power, and there were theories of selfishness and competition, and of course the Darwinian view of sexuality, which is what I call the king and I approach to sexuality. Those of you who remember this musical, the king sings, "A woman must be like a flower with honey for just one man. The man must be like the honeybee and gather all he can." No one in those days were interviewing the queen, okay? And I must tell you that in my ensuing decades of studying the study of sex differences, I have to tell you that is the one difference that has been most reliable and unchanging in all of these years. Men really, really love that theory more than women do. Okay, so as women, though, enter these fields of evolution and biology and in the trail of the brilliant and wonderful Robert Trivers, we've learned that not only is female promiscuity a part of human behavior, but so are such overlooked virtues as cooperation, altruism, and empathy. Now, what does this have to do with self-deception? I think this. Today, when all of us on this weary, fighting planet are so worried about the state of our lives, about the state of our planet, we resonate to the evidence that we aren't so sapiens after all. Look at how many books, look at how much research has come out showing that we are irrational, emotional, foolish, and self-deluding, which we are. But if evolution gave us self-deception, it also gave us self-awareness. If it gave us gullibility, it also gave us skepticism. It gave us greediness, it also gave us fairness, a sense of fair play. It gave us the ability to invent spam and the ability to invent science. So to me as a social psychologist, the interesting question is not just what hath evolution wrought, but what are the social and cultural conditions that allow us or require us to shape our capacities in one direction or another? My topic here is cognitive dissonance, which indeed is one of the key mechanisms of self-deception. And it's a good example of the benefits and disadvantages of evolution in this respect, because although it does seem to be hardwired, we can learn to correct for it in the same way that understanding the optical illusions that we've seen gives us insight and the ability to control for them. Dissonance is indeed the discomfort we feel when two cognitions contradict each other. Jon Stewart, who is using this term all the time on his show, describes the process as two rats fighting in a bag. Okay. And that's exactly right. Smoking is bad for me versus I'm a heavy smoker. They don't live well in the bag. Dissonance is as uncomfortable as hunger, and like hunger, we're motivated to reduce it. Smokers have to quit, or they have to justify smoking. Self-justification is what allows us to sleep at night, comfortable in the choices that we've made. We make a decision, as Susana said, and then we find an explanation for it. We justify it. Despots do this. They justify the thousands of people they have murdered in their regimes. They sleep just fine at night. The need to reduce dissonance, however, is most powerful when we are confronted with evidence that we have done something inconsistent with our own view of ourselves. And, as Robert pointed out, since our view of ourselves is that we all live in Lake Wobegon, and we are brighter, kinder, cuter, smarter, and more ethical than everybody else, we are really motivated to maintain that view of ourselves. There was a very cute study done at two fundamentalist Christian colleges in America where the great majority of students thought they were humbler than average. Thank you. I do love that study. Okay. So, faced now with this evidence, somebody says, you've just done something really stupid, Carol. You know, look, you've done this foolish thing, or this incompetent thing, or this unethical thing, or this fattening thing. Now we have a choice. We can say, oh, thank you so much for giving me this evidence, showing me that my lifelong philosophy of childbearing is wrong, and that my belief in vaccines causing autism is wrong, and oh, thank you for pointing out that I've just behaved like an idiot. I'm so grateful to you. Or we don't. We dismiss the evidence, we tell the other person to go and get lost, thank you very much for your observations, but you're really an idiot. So is your data, and you know what you can do with your data. What we do, in short, is we discredit the evidence to maintain our view of ourselves as being good, kind, ethical, and fair. Now, this kind of self-justification is self-deception, but it's not the same thing as intentionally lying to others to get off the hot seat when we're caught doing something we know is wrong. The insidious thing about dissonance reduction is that it is largely an unconscious mechanism that allows us to lie to ourselves to preserve our opinion of ourselves. That's why the implications of this theory, of this research, are so important, because they show that our problems don't arise from bad people doing bad things. They arise from all of us, good people, bad people, whatever that generic term means, from people who justify the bad things they do in order to preserve their belief that they're good people. Okay? That's why this kind of self-deception can be so dangerous. Now, how do people come to do those foolish, bad, unethical things in the first place? It works like this. First slide. This is from an actual study of children. Let's imagine we have two students at the top of a pyramid. They're a millimeter apart in their attitudes toward cheating. They think it's not a good thing to do, but look, there are worse crimes in the world, and it's not a good thing, it's not a horrible thing, it's just a thing. I would never do it myself, but it's not so bad. Now they're taking a final exam. This exam is crucial for their grade in the course. They're going to either get into graduate school or not. Their whole lives depend on this exam. And they freeze on an important question. They freeze. They haven't a clue what the answer is. They know they're going to go down with this exam. And now the student next to them, the one with the beautiful handwriting, makes her answer apparent. Do you cheat or don't you cheat? On an impulse, one cheats. One looks at her answers and cribs from them, and the other says, no, I'm not going to do that. One gives up the grade for integrity, the other gives up integrity for the grade. Next slide. Now, nope, you went too far. Backward, okay? Now, here's the point. The minute you make a step off that pyramid, the minute you take some behavioral change, cheat or don't cheat, now you must justify the action you took in order to reduce dissonance. That is, to keep your behavior consonant with your attitudes. You can't change the behavior, so you shift the attitude. The one who cheated will now justify that action by saying, cheating really isn't such a big deal. Everybody cheats. Everybody here cheats. It's a normal thing, and besides, in another language, we would be calling it cooperation. And besides which, also, I need to do this for my career. But the one who resisted the temptation to cheat will justify that action by deciding that cheating is far more immoral than he originally thought. In fact, this is not a victimless crime. Cheating is disgraceful. People who cheat should be expelled. We must make an example of them. Within a week, they will have slid down this pyramid of self-justification and dissonance reduction to be as far apart in their ideas about cheating as you can imagine. And they will now think they have always felt that way about cheating. One wants to hang up cheaters by their ankles and get them out of this school, and the other is dismissing it as not being important. Now here then is my message about self-deception. All of us will be on the top of that pyramid frequently in our lives with a choice to make. Stay in a troubled relationship or get out. Admit your part in that family quarrel or keep blaming your brother-in-law. Begin an extramarital affair or not. Have a little schmoodle in the men's room of the airport with that guy. You've always wanted to know what that was like or not. Believe that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction or not. Whichever choice we make, we will justify it to keep our attitudes and our behavior in harmony, and this is the key. We will then start looking only for information that supports our decision that we were right, and we will ignore, forget, minimize, and trivialize any information that is dissonant, that suggests that we were wrong. That process of action, self-justification, and further action along that slippery slope increases our commitment to the first decision, which might only have been a small impulse. How do you corrupt an innocent man? You just get him to take one small step off the pyramid, and self-justification and self-deception will do the rest. Cognitive dissonance and the self-deception it creates may be built into our mental wiring, but how we think about our mistakes, how we take action to correct them if we do, is not. That is learned, that is up to what our culture encourages or punishes. Many people in our culture learn and can learn that owning up to mistakes, being open to discrepant, dissonant information, that's the fundamental of science, leads to other ideas, better ideas, and it preserves relationships. I have yet to find anybody who is really upset when you say to them, honey, I've thought about this a long time, and you know, I was wrong and you were right. So my last word on this is an appreciation of the evolutionary benefits of dissonance and self-deception is no justification for not working to override them when we need to, and to protect ourselves from the people who won't or can't. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. I can hear me. Can you hear me? Good. We're going to, from Carol having gone through, in some sense, an issue we'll deal with later, which is how to deal with deception. We're going to come full circle and come back to Jamy and Swiss, who is, as you can tell, a remarkable magician. But more than that, in fact, Jamy has been producer of a number of magic shows, the longest-running off-Broadway magic show in New York for 15 years, Monday Night Magic. But he's also been writing and lecturing about magic for a long time, and about, in fact, the issue of deception. And in that regard, he's also been very active in the skeptic community. And he's now, in fact, a fellow of the James Randi Foundation. And he helps administer what many of you may have heard as the $1 Million Prize, which has been offered to anyone who can demonstrate paranormal ability under mutually agreed upon text conditions. And of course, no one's won that prize. And I should, before he begins, I'll just say the New Yorker magazine declared that he is widely thought of to have one of the most masterly sleight of hand techniques in the world today. And we'll see what his sleight of mouth technique is in a moment. So, Jamy.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. Thanks. I'd like to begin by addressing, albeit very briefly, the first two questions that were on the agenda today. One, why is deception such an integral part of the human condition? And two, what evolutionary purpose could it possibly serve? So, albeit briefly, do these pants make my ass look fat? That concludes the portion of my addressing the first two questions on the agenda. Moving on. I'm a professional magician, and I would like to talk to you today about how magicians deceive you. Now, all magicians know that magic, a successful magic illusion, occurs only in the minds of the spectator. As a magician friend and colleague of mine, Peter Samuelson, so elegantly puts it, I can't really do magic, I can only help you to see it. But to manipulate the mind of another person requires that one is able to imagine that mind. And in the worlds of philosophy and psychology, this is known as theory of mind. And theory of mind, in its most basic description, is the ability to attribute mental states to others, beliefs, intents, desires, and more, in order to better understand how those beliefs cause action in others. And a subset or related concept of theory of mind is the notion of empathy, which is the emotional component. It's the ability to share the feelings of others, the emotional aspect of theory of mind. Now, I found a quote where Robert Trivers has said that empathy is a very important part of deceit. And I agree. And I've just said that to empathize, one must construct a theory of mind, an awareness of the existence of minds outside our own. And humans can begin to do this at a surprisingly young age. What's interesting about this, partly to me as a magician, is that in order to try and establish or identify the development of theory of mind, we use the ability to deceive. We investigate the ability to deceive, because the ability to create deception as well as to understand the notion of false belief in others are requisites to a concept of mind. So while it was long believed that children did not master the technique of lying until the age of 4 or so, more recently behavioral studies indicate that infants can begin to exhibit deceptive behavior as early as 6 months. And one recent study revealed that, quote, infants quickly learned that using tactics such as fake crying and pretend laughing could win them attention. And that by 8 months, more difficult deceptions became apparent, such as concealing forbidden activities or trying to distract parents' attention. 8 months! Or as a typically colorful headline from the UK's Globe and Mail put it, sneaky babies learn to lie before they learn to talk. Now, although magicians use deception, we do so in a context that is both authentic and indeed ethical. By invoking the word magic or conjuring, magicians establish a clear moral contract with the audience. In the words of a world-famous American magician at the turn of the 20th century, Carol Tavris, he said that, quote, conjuring is the only absolutely honest profession. The conjurer promises to deceive and does. See, if I didn't tell you first, I'd be in advertising or politics. And my website, by the way, is honestliar.com, so there. But while magicians use deception in service to to artistic goals, creating the experience of mystery for our audiences, in other contexts, deception can be used to take advantage, to turn audiences into victims. For example, in the world of the professional con man. Now, I can tell you that the con artist takes his victim on a kind of controlled psychological tour when, for example, he suckers a mark, a victim, with 3-card Monte or shell game, street scams, and so-called short cons that have been around for centuries but still continue to find a ready supply of fresh victims around the world every day. And you know, the word con in con game actually is short for confidence, because it speaks to the requirement of the con man to gain the victim's confidence, yes, and eventually in knowing and controlling what the mark will think, what he will feel, and ultimately what he will do. So, to create an effective performance, the con artist and the magician alike must engage the audience's emotions. And not just for their intellect, not just their intellect, or else magic is reduced to a mere puzzle, not an experience of mystery, an intellectual experience instead of an emotional and aesthetic one. And so, whether for good or for ill, empathy is a necessity. Now, I'm going to use a coin for a moment here to demonstrate, just give you a brief glimpse into how hard we work to try and fool you. Because we don't get to use lying as a method. We're honest liars, and we've told you that we're lying. And that changes a lot of things. So here's something that your grandfather did terribly, but can be done beautifully. To make a coin disappear. It's what you saw Apollo Robbins do before. It's called the French drop. It's a basic technique of sleight of hand, one of the first things we learned to make a coin or small object disappear. There's a lot of steps involved in this because it's a very unnatural way of doing this. Now, when your grandfather did this, he probably pointed at the other hand like this and clenched his hand and in some desperate attempt to fool you, and it probably worked because you were 5. But when I teach this technique to my adult students, I actually begin with the position of the feet. Because this is what magicians call a false transfer. We're pretending to transfer the coin from one hand to the other. It's a very unnatural event. It's not something that actually occurs in real life very often. And so, in order to try and convince you of that, we have to try and transfer everything else but the coin to try and convince you. So we begin by transferring weight. I begin with the weight here, with that knee locked, and then as I do the sleight, I'm going to transfer the weight from one to the other. You don't see that consciously, but you will register it. I transfer tension. There's tension in this hand. The wrist is locked. This hand is relaxed and apparently empty. And as I appear to transfer the coin, I've now transferred the tension. I've added it to this hand, subtracted it from this hand, which is apparently relaxed and empty now, and I've transferred my focus with my eyes and my head, focusing on the coin here, and then on the coin here. I'm transferring everything but the coin. And to give you even a further little window into this, you might think that if I was going to make a coin disappear, I might rely on something called palming, right? Whatever that is. Well, even that's misleading. It's a misleading term because it doesn't really have anything to do with the palm. Palming is a jargon term for magicians that means a concealment. And we have many, many concealments in the hand. So there might be high finger palm, low finger palm, thumb palm, front finger grip, back palm, first finger grip, fourth finger grip, deep center back clip. And sometimes in order to make that coin disappear, it might just amount to balancing the coin on the back of the hand. I mean, who? But you see, the method, many people think that the thing that separates magicians from the rest of you is that we know the method, but this is silly. The method, the mechanical method of the French drop is this. That's it. You lift the thumb, the coin falls down. That's the method. But by itself, this does nothing without what magicians call misdirection, which relates to all of the psychology and the naturalness and the movement and the timing and all of this stuff that goes together to create a deception. And when you put it all together, it can look like that. But the important thing is, never point. Thank you. Now, it's been said that sleight of hand, like I just showed you there, is lying with the hands. And you remember at the start when I said that I was done addressing the subject of the social and psychological benefits of deception? I lied. Because in considering the cost of deception, one must ask, how is it that we are all so readily deceived? Indeed, for anyone who wants to try to protect themselves and others from being deceived, whether by con men or phony psychics or professional casino cheats, all subjects of professional and personal interest to me, the single most important lesson I have today to offer you is this. Everyone can be fooled. Anyone can be fooled. And blaming the victim's stupidity is often a seriously mistaken and inappropriate explanation. Rather, one must often credit the con man. Like the magician, the con man has developed and refined his principles of deceptions over centuries, taking advantage of his practical expertise in human psychology, the same kind of practical expertise that Susana and Stephen are trying to tease out and study in a scientific manner today. But what is it in our psychological makeup that renders us all so deceivable? The answer, in short, is trust. Human beings have evolved to be trusting beings. Now, I want to point out there's a conventional trope about people supposedly wanting to be deceived. Well, I think this is nonsense. Rather, there are aspects of the way our brain has evolved that can, as a side effect, lead us to be deceived. Safely by magicians, dangerously by advertisers and politicians, all but fatally by con men and sociopaths. But that is that in order to be a social animal, you have to be able to trust others. It makes sense to want to believe people. We have evolved to disbelieve the notion that people can look us in the eye and lie. It's very hard for us to process that, because the alternative, an ever-vigilant extreme of caution and protectiveness, is contrary to being an effective social animal. A human animal that is constantly wary, relentlessly on guard, quick to protect itself against any risk of deception, would be a very untrusting being. And that's not a being that will find it easy to develop constructive relationships and function well socially with his peers and colleagues, family, and society. To do these things, we must be willing to trust. And indeed, to trust is in our very nature, and despite the associated risks. Now, the main protections we have against deceivers is our built-in in-group, out-group programming, which kicks in at a very early age in mammals, as soon as we've learned to recognize immediate family and friends. But that's a generalized kind of hope for the best protection that evolution has given us. It doesn't account for individuals who are willing to operate maliciously within the group. It doesn't protect you from Bernie Madoff, who ruthlessly relied upon in-group status to manipulate his victims. And as Carol recently pointed out to me, our psychology is pre-wired to protect us from the times when we will inevitably be fooled, which typically produces dissonance. How could I have been so stupid? And which we immediately strive to reduce. I wasn't stupid. Let me mortgage my house and give the guy another 100 grand, which people actually did with Madoff. So I confess, I think it's foolish to talk about people's desire to be deceived. Just as any of us can be fooled, all of us engage in self-deception as well. But ultimately, it's for a higher purpose, for the benefits it delivers us in dealing with ourselves, other people, and the inherent dissonance of this world. Nobody wants to be fooled, except at the magic show, where being fooled is not the same as being a fool. But fooled we all shall be. And it cannot happen without empathy or without trust. And the ability to trust, even when the cost means being occasionally victimized, is central and essential in human life and society. So sure, try not to be fooled, but don't be too hard on yourself when it happens. Thanks.
Before we do anything else, I want to thank the panel for such a wonderful program. And now since you're all now experts on deception, we thought we'd end this segment before we go into the intermission with a chance for you to be deceived one more time. So I'm going to ask Jamy to stay on stage, and the rest of us will go off, and Jamy will take us out to the intermission. So
Thank
we'll
you.
See you soon.
So, I'd like to leave you with a vivid demonstration of the role that empathy plays in magic. You know, from the very start in magic, magicians use empathy. Most people get involved in magic at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10. And by the age of 8, I had practice mirrors on my table, right, that I practiced in. And those mirrors represented the eyes and minds that I was trying to fool. They were windows into an alien consciousness, which I was trying to create an illusion for that I could not experience myself. So I'm going to give you sort of a crack at that. I'm going to offer you a unique piece of magic in which all of you will be able to see the workings and exercise your own empathic abilities. And I believe that the more empathy that you have, the more you will enjoy the result. Now, I approached someone earlier, didn't make any prearrangements other than to simply ask, it's Kim, right? Is that right? If you were willing to help me, are you willing to give me a help? But would you come up? And it's Kim. Would you give her a warm welcome? Thank you so much for joining me, and let's go this way. And although I did ask you quickly, briefly before if you were willing to help, other than that, you have no idea what's going on. We haven't prearranged anything or anything like that. Now, you and I are going to collaborate here and demonstrate a unique kind of magic, the kind of magic that I can accomplish when I deprive you of one of your senses. Now, it will not be your sense of humor. We need that. And there will be no permanent damage, I promise, okay? And it's not my intention to embarrass you in any way at all. I really think you're going to have a unique experience and a memorable and magical one, okay? So the sense I'm going to deprive you of, Kim, is your sense of sight. And I don't want to blindfold you because from time to time I need you to open your eyes and you'll see what's going on, yes? So, but when I do ask you to keep your eyes closed, I'll ask you to really kind of concentrate on that. If you open your eyes sort of accidentally or blink or something, you'll just see it at the wrong time and you'll lose the sense of the illusion. Fair enough? So I thought we'd begin with a little test. Close your eyes, please. Dark in there, isn't it? It actually makes a lot of this magic stuff a little easier from what I've heard. I'm going to come back to you right here now. Okay. And open your eyes. And has anything changed? Yes, and that is? I have a hanger around. Good, that's good, because if you didn't notice, it means I'm doing magic for the visually impaired. No one's impressed. I actually grew up in Brooklyn. We used to call this a car antenna. Now, I've dated myself. Could you come just a little closer to me? Thank you very much. That's good. And now, if you would be so kind as to extend your hand straight out to me like this, almost together, just like that. And I'm just going to, just a little bit lower, I'm just going to run my hands down your arms. Obviously, you can feel that. You can see that. You know exactly where my hands are. And I'm going to do that one more time in a moment. I'd like you to close your eyes now. This is no longer a test. And keep them closed until I explicitly ask you to open your eyes. I'll count off later and ask you to open them. Once again, one more time, I'll rub my hands down your arms. And as a matter of fact, just to make us a little more secure, would you turn your hands up and grasp me by the wrists, please, firmly from beneath. Hold tight. A little blood must flow. Now don't let go, but do give me a little flex. Keep your hands closed, but do give me a little room to flex so I can reach up, take the hanger from over my head, and I will tap you with that. You can feel that, yes? Okay? And so now, in a moment, I will count to 3, and at that moment, on the count of 3, and only on the count of 3, you can open your eyes as you and the entire audience will see the solid hanger pass through your arm. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's a little strange, huh? Yes, it is. Okay. all right. It's supposed to be. Now, can you figure out any way to get that off without letting go of me? That would be the magic part. So you can let go now. You can let go and take a look while you have it. Make sure it's solid, right? It doesn't come apart. There's no breaks, no gaps, no holes. A little hole in there, but that doesn't count. And here's the idea. The first time there, you had control over my hands, always a good idea. The second time, we'll start by giving you control over the hanger. So reach out with your right hand and just grasp the hanger just like that. That's perfect. And now I'll ask you to close your eyes again, all right? Keep them closed until I ask you to open them. And while you have a grip on it, you have a grip on the hanger, right? Reach out with your left hand and just wrap it over your around your other hand. That's good. And now in a moment, I'm going to ask you to release the hanger to me, but only open enough to let the hanger out, and then immediately reclasp your hand so that the circle of your arms remains unbroken, yes? So just release the hanger to me. Right now? Yes. Thank you. Okay. Wow, you weren't taking any chances. That's good. That's good. Okay. So you can feel the hanger outside there, okay? Now, once again, I'm going to count to 3, and on the count of 3, and only then, you can open your eyes as you and the entire audience will see the solid hanger pass through your arm. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Did you all see it pass through her arm? A little stranger than the first one, yes? Okay, so now let's see what we can do. I'll tell you what, face front, if you would. And this time, I'll give you control. The first time you had control over my hands, the second time you had control over the hanger, this time I'm going to give you control over the closed circle that we're going to try and pass the hanger onto. So if you would be so kind as to put your right hand on top of your head, just like this. Jelly bean, I've dated myself. Okay, and now face front. And close your eyes, all right? Keep them closed until I ask you. Now, it's funny, people in your situation, they often come up to me after the show and they say, I don't know exactly how you did that, Jamy, but I think you cheated. And it's true, I do cheat, but honest, only a little. And so here's now, is there any way you can think of I could possibly get this solid hanger into the circle of your arm right now? Any way you could think of me doing that? Well, I could chop off your head or cut off your arm, but I did promise there would be no permanent damage. So those are excluded from the protocol. So now, once again, you can feel the hanger outside. I'm going to count to 3. And on the number 3, you can open your eyes as you and everyone else sees the solid hanger pass through your arm. 1, 2, 3. Oh, baby. Yeah, right? Keep your hand up there. Keep your hand up there. Okay. See that? Okay. Now, just for the record, okay, now face front, because I don't want to hurt you. If I hurt you, I'll marry you. Okay, now the truth of the matter is, we did not prearrange any of this, and you're not just going along with this for the ride. You actually don't know how it works, right? I mean, it's like it's over your head. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There'll be an apology in the Times in the morning. Okay. So here we go. One last time. Close your eyes, face front, keep your hand up there, keep your eyes closed. Extend your left hand, arm, all the way out to the left, if you would. Matter of fact, put your left hand on your hip. Okay, and you can feel the hanger here in your arm, okay? And now, I'm going to tap you 3 times very slowly, and on the count of 3, you can open your eyes and witness the miracle. 1, 2, 2.5, and 3. And that's amazing, and that's empathy. Thank you, darling. You're great. I told you it'd be fun, right? Hey, it's Kim. Give her a nice hand. So Magicians fall in love with magic, as I said, about the age of 7 and 10, and then we spend our lives trying to create illusions for the experience of illusions for others, the experience of mystery for others, and the better we get at creating that, the less we're able to experience ourselves, until we get to the point where most of the time we're only experiencing magic vicariously through the eyes and the mind of our audience. And so I hope you all enjoyed having the opportunity to see how that worked. But even if you had a good experience doing that, and I hope you did, I think Kim had an even better experience. She had a unique experience of mystery. And with knowledge comes a burden, yes? And a small burden is, although not insignificant, is the burden of helping to preserve Kim's sense of mystery tonight. Because there is no honor or heroism in ripping it away from her. So I would not be in a hurry to do that. But more significantly, there is this, is that the fact that she had a unique experience that now, with the burden of knowledge, now and forever, will always be denied to the rest of you. So the next time you think you want to know how a magic trick is done, just remember, that opportunity is now denied you. And hey, you know, I'm truly sorry about that, but hell, I empathize. Thanks a lot. It's intermission. We'll see you for the Q&A.